Hello everybody, welcome back to this week's painting video. This week I am painting some monochrome paintings with watercolor. So I did this painting with an akvarel block and I got this from Tiger for like €5. Paper quality, it's not the best. You'll see in the painting it kind of buckles a little, but I definitely think that for the price this compares really well to Canson or other more expensive brands. For this painting, I'm using Winsor & Newton watercolors, and the first color that I'm using right now is called cadmium red. The first thing that I did in this painting was a series of tonal studies where I tried to establish my darkest color all the way up to the lightest one. I think a lot of times when I work with a lot of colors, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. But when you sort of simplify things and take it back to one color, it's a lot easier to see how much of a range you can get. The first painting that I did was just a simple landscape study. Right now I'm working on a larger painting and I wanted to practice a potential background for that painting. So this monochrome study was a really good way of figuring out my composition, but then also starting to consider where I wanted the darkest places of my painting to be and where I wanted my highlights to exist. So I sort of just messed around with trying out different shapes and different forms and different ranges in color tone that I could get with the cadmium red, just to see what it was like, if I liked this composition and if I wanted to use it in a final painting later on. Yeah, I kind of messed up a little when pulling up the tape. I'm not using the best quality tape, and again, this paper is really cheap, so I kind of ripped it a little bit, but that's okay. And so just like the first painting, I did a tonal study where I went from my darkest dark to my lightest light. And again, this was super beneficial for just comparing it to the final painting. So the second painting, I wanted to do a larger and more detailed scene. I kind of liked how the last one turned out compositionally, so I wanted to think about, where would I put a person in this? So just like the last one, I began with a wash, and then I started to go in and establish my colors from the lightest ranges down to the darkest. With watercolor, it's important to start with a really big brush. Honestly, the brush that I'm using, I could probably have used an even bigger one. It's good to start with a big brush because you don't get so focused on details in the beginning, and it's really easy to do really large swashes of color without getting sucked into detail too much. These monochrome paintings were a lot of fun because it kind of challenged me to work with a really limited supply palette and a relatively cheap supply palette. The paintbrushes that I'm using here with the pink handles, I got them from like Tuesday Morning or something for really, really cheap, like less than $10. So I think these types of paintings are really important in showing that you can make art with almost anything. Art isn't really dependent on the cost of the supplies that you're doing it with. So in this painting, I'm doing a more detailed study of a nature scene, but I wanted to incorporate a figure into this. Just like my last painting, I worked from large sections and then gradually built up to the detail. So I tried to resist using my small brush for as long as possible and using very dark colors for as long as possible. Because once the color is down, it's a lot harder to wipe it off with watercolor. You can add in water and sort of splotch it with a paper towel, and you'll see me doing that a few times in this, but it's much harder to go from dark to light than light to dark in watercolor. So that was something I tried to keep in mind while doing this painting. And like most paintings, at first it starts out really rough and it doesn't look like anything, it just looks like a bunch of blobs. But gradually over time, as you build up the color, shapes start to emerge and forms start to emerge. And it gets more exciting once you start going into the detail. I think the biggest challenge of this painting was trying to show a range in light. I really wanted to have a strong contrast in the light on the person versus the light on the rocks and the trees in the background. And I definitely struggled with this for quite a while. Because of this, I ended up going in with a white pen. I know some people consider using a white pen cheating, but I think for these monochrome studies, it's super important to go back in with a white highlight to distinguish important areas. And for this painting, I used the white to distinguish the ground from the water because it started to blend in a lot. The reflection of the ground and the rocks on the water blended in a lot with the painted ground. So using just very subtle white strokes of a pen was super important to the overall piece. And for the final touches, I just went in with almost pure purple lake just to really darken my darks and enhance that contrast. So that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. These were a lot of fun to do, and I hope to do more of them in the future. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you all really soon.